Hey guys, what's going on? This is your boy RJ Game News USA here, back today with another video. And today we're going to go over the Michael Jackson movie. I'm going to give it my review, my thoughts. But first, please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Before we jump into my personal review, I want to discuss the discourse surrounding this movie. So, the critics hate it. They gave it like a 40%. But fans love it. They gave it a 96%. And there's a lot of things to factor in and consider here. This does happen a lot sometimes with good movies. Critics hate it, and then the fans love it. And that's because the movies are made for the fans. You know what I mean? And the critics are kind of forced to be there because it's their job. And they tend to look at everything through a hypercritical lens, of course. That and honestly, movie critics are mostly just assholes. Let's be honest about it. But anyway, I walked away from this movie thinking that this was an all-time masterpiece, legitimately. And it's not like there's nothing super special going on. Like, it's not like, they're rewriting history or there's some kind of twist or there's something you didn't expect. It's literally just, we're telling like the first 20 years of Michael Jackson's career, and you're mostly listening to Michael Jackson's music, and it's fucking cool. Okay? But we're going to get into the positives here shortly. Let's discuss the negatives first. And I would have to say there are no negatives. So we'll be able to skip that part right away because there's really no negatives. Like, a lot of people's negatives don't make sense. Like, a lot of the critics are saying, well, it didn't cover this whole story. It's the first part of it, part 2. Okay? So you literally cannot complain about that whenever they're not covering his controversies or covering the rest of his life, whenever this is the first part of a planned 2-parter movie. Okay? That's silliness. That's silliness that would even be a complaint whenever it is purposely planned to be a 2-part movie. Anyway, so we could throw that criticism right out the door. And really, there's not much criticism outside of that. Some people say there's an extent on the plot. I disagree. I'm going to go over why I like the plot. So we're going to shift over to the positives, starting with that plot. So the plot is essentially the story of Michael getting out of his father's thumb. Getting out from underneath his father's thumb. Striking out on his own. Standing up against his father. Now, of course, he didn't stand up to his father, an old-fashioned way or in a confrontational way. Michael had a lawyer fire him at one point. Or his agent fire him at one point. He tried roundabout ways to get around getting out of his father's thumb. But by the end of the movie, he did. Because in real life, that's what happened. Okay? The thing that makes this story's plot interesting to me is that it's actually real. This really happened the way that it happened for the most part in real life. So to criticize the plot would almost be to be criticizing Michael Jackson's life. Which I guess is fair game, except for the fact that he's lived the most interesting life of anybody that's ever lived. So you kind of defeat the purpose there when you attack the plot. So I thought the plot was good. They easily could have done some tomfoolery and dickfuckery by introducing elements that just weren't there in the plot, and they didn't. And there was a lot of stuff there that I didn't even know about that ended up being true, and it was a huge part of the plot, So yeah, I give the plot an A+ here. I think it's a good plot. Then we move on to the characters. We got to start with Michael himself. Talk about an excellent portrayal of Michael Jackson. You really believe you're watching him. Like, legitimately. Now, the person playing Michael is his actual nephew. His real-life nephew. And he sort of is a spitting image of him. And what's remarkable about this movie, that truly is remarkable, is this guy has never acted a day in his life. and he is a lead role for a movie that's going to make over $1 billion. And just because he looks like Michael Jackson, right? But that being said, that easily could have been a big problem for the movie. But somehow, some way, this rookie actor put on an absolutely stellar performance, which means you also have to credit the director, the producer, and everybody around him to put him in a position to succeed. That also is going to piss off some actors too. Because let's be honest, if some rook can come in there and act the way that he did and perform the way that he did, that should put actors that have been there 10, 20, 30 years in other movies who don't have performances as good as him in his career to shame. To shame. He just put the entire acting business to shame. And I'm sure that also factors into why some of the critics bombed this review off the assumption that this is a rookie actor. We got to put him through the loops. Nobody gives a shit about your critic reviews, okay? The fans love it, and this movie is going to make over $1 billion. So, honestly, the critics can go cry about it. But anyway, and as far as characters go, the next most interesting character to me is obviously Joseph the father. He only has one scene in the movie where he whips Michael with the belt. It was a pretty harsh scene. It really sets the tone. But let's be honest. He's no different in a lot of ways than your average father from the 80s or the 60s or the 70s. Belt whoopings used to be a thing. I know I have sometimes a younger audience that doesn't believe that. Trust me, I know firsthand, belt whoopings was a thing, okay? I'll tell you. Now they just give you all a tablet and tell you you're in timeout, right? But belt whoopings really happen. And so, Michael got his ass whooping at one point, for talking back to his father. And regardless, whatever that context of the conversation was, that was pretty normal in late 60s, early 70s America. If you talk back to your father to get an ass whooping with a belt. All right? I'm just saying. But that being said, the movie did a great job portraying Joseph as selfish, as a jerk, as uncaring about his son, about only caring about enriching himself. Although they made Joseph himself was trying to convince others around him, well, I'm doing it for my boys, get them out of being poor. And, to a degree, Joseph being hard on them, Joseph training them and, teaching them and managing them did help them get their start. The problem is the dude never transitioned out of being a hard ass. Once the millions were made, once Michael wanted to go off on his own, Joseph could have gave him a firm handshake and said, thank you for all you've done for this family, son. Now go out and be a superstar. He never gave him that love and support that Michael yearned for. And I also want to go back to Michael's character a little bit, too. Michael, clearly, he has Peter Pan syndrome a little bit. He preferred to be childlike. He even was reading Peter Pan a lot. Of course, we know in the future, he has his own Neverland Ranch. He liked to have animals around. We got to see a monkey, a giraffe, a llama. So some pretty cool shit there about his personality. He definitely liked to sign autographs, and he helped kids with cancer. And that was all good stuff. So, for the most part, I think they portrayed early Michael as early Michael was. I thought the Pepsi scene... See, I always heard about the Pepsi commercial and how, Michael could have died and all that. I always thought it was like, a smaller accident. It was a little overblown maybe. But when I actually watched the scene itself play out and then the aftermath, the dude really could have died from that freaking accident. It was more than just a little tiny fire. And so that actually gave me a lot more perspective on that his career could have been over even. But... that being said, we got to move on. There's other characters to talk about. There's too much to talk about with characters. I thought the mom was good as a reassuring character. The brothers, for the most part, they really didn't spend a lot of time on the brothers. And that's not really a criticism because the movie's over 2 hours. It only covers half of Michael Jackson's career, basically, and life. And the brothers really, you didn't get too many scenes about the brothers. The brothers were in scenes, they were involved in scenes, but they rarely had a lot of dialogue with each other. And if this was a Jackson 5 movie, then I would probably be critical of this. But this is a Michael Jackson movie. So I thought that the brothers actually being more background was actually a good thing. I thought the bodyguard was great. He seemed like a really good friend. I thought one of my favorite scenes actually was when they're in this office and Michael Jackson picks out his new lawyer, agent, fixer, whatever. And everybody else leaves the room and he picks this guy and this guy gets shit done. Another one of my favorite scenes involving him as well was when they were trying to get on MTV and the CBS guy couldn't get him on MTV, but then they called his bluff and he got him on the phone and he basically said, you're going to get Billie Jean on MTV one way or another. And so I love that scene as well. So there's specific scenes that I really liked. And then now we got to get on to the best parts of the movie, honestly. The visuals are awesome. You know, the costumes were great. And obviously, you know, it's like seeing Michael Jackson from back then, but in 4K, in like modern like visuals. And then we got to get to the audio, which is obviously the highlight of the movie. You know, just amazing music. You know, Michael Jackson's one of the best performers of all time for a reason. His music is great, and most of this movie is his music, his performances. And even in the little scenes in between, they would play his music like in the background. I don't think there was a single piece of music in this movie that wasn't just some sort of hymn from Michael Jackson or Michael Jackson himself singing. So I think that was great. And if you know, this director, he also did the Queen biopic a few years ago, and I really loved that. And I also gave that a 10 out of 10 back then. I thought that was a great biopic. And that even had what you could consider a more interesting story. Because Freddie Mercury, they did his whole life, and there was also, you know, a lot of controversies involving him. And so I am really excited to see part 2 of what this Michael movie could be with all the controversies coming up. And it'll be a much darker movie than this one. But this was very lighthearted in tone. And somehow, some way, this movie delivered even better than the Queen biopic. So I highly recommend this movie. I could sing its praises for hours. There's so many things that, little nuances here, little Easter eggs, little homages, you know, name drops, history, musical history. You know, there's so much here to talk about. Just the dynamic between him and his family, the dynamic between him and the fans. There's a lot of little things I could touch on, but I think I'm going to end the review here because the bottom line is this. I don't want to give it all away totally. You know, I want you guys to go watch the movie, go enjoy the movie. I think I would recommend this to everyone. And I'm going to say 10 out of 10 for sure. It's one of the best movies of this decade in the 2020s. Highly recommend it. And I'm usually somebody that watches horror movies almost exclusively. Like 70-80% of the movies I watch are horror movies. You know, I will say the Thriller scene was pretty cool. Speaking of horror with the zombie dancing and all that. But yeah, highly recommend this movie. Go check it out. Michael, it's in theaters. That's it though, guys. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Are you going to go see Michael? Let me know. But for now, this is RJ signing out. Have a good one.